Hello and welcome to this past paper on the Cold War. This one is to explain one consequence of the Yalta Conference. Okay, so when we look at the consequences then, we are concerning ourselves with what happens after Yalta. We don't want to talk about Yalta itself, we just want to say what happens because of Yalta. How does it make people feel? Perhaps how does it make people react? What agreements were made? Why were those agreements made? And then what does it actually lead to? These are the important questions we want to try and solve in our answer. Okay, so it's useful to think of a context anyway, just to give the background of Yalta so it's in our minds. So previously at Tehran, the Grand Alliance had met for the first time. That was in 1943, and they'd agreed to open up a second front, which by the time we get to Yalta, that has happened. Remember, they brought forward that issue of Poland, what was going to happen to Poland after the war. It was really still a bit murky. But really, Yalta takes place in February 1945, and the Allies had previously now invaded D-Day between then and Tehran. Stalin was so close to Berlin, he was miles from Berlin, and there was that concern, if you remember, that Stalin was going to conquer Berlin before the Allies got there, and he might take control of all of Germany. And then there was that concern that was ongoing about what was Stalin doing with all those countries he'd liberated as he was moving to Berlin. So this is all the things that were going on at Yalta in the back of the minds of the different people. And there was a lot more tension at Yalta, even though we still have the same players. We've still got Roosevelt, Stalin, and Churchill meeting up. But we're concerned with the consequences. So what are you going to include in your answer about the consequences of Yalta? Well, you could discuss the agreements that were made, because those are a consequence and those are going to shape the future of Europe. Or you could talk about the tension that comes out from the conference afterwards because of the disagreements. So let's look at the agreements first. If you chose to write about this, you could talk about the idea that Germany was split into four between the UK, US, France, and the USSR. You could also mention perhaps that Berlin is going to be in the USSR's zone, which is a little bit awkward. You could talk about denazifying policy and the chasing down of war criminals, how they want to create a democracy there and to demilitarize, with the hope that if they manage all the sections of Germany and demilitarize it, the idea is that hopefully they will unite Germany again one day. You could also talk about Europe widely as well. You could say another consequence was that they're unsure about what Stalin's going to do with Poland, but Stalin does agree that he would keep his promise and allow free elections. And you could say that perhaps you could explore that by saying that although they don't trust Stalin, there's nothing they can do because they still haven't defeated Hitler. So they need Stalin to finish off what they're going to do with World War II. And so they have to trust that Stalin will keep his promises. But those are the agreements and those are the consequences. And we know that they are actually carried out, especially the split of Germany. Well, you could also do the increase in tension because we know the conference wasn't perfect. You could talk about the disagreements and you could say, well, they couldn't agree on reparations because Stalin wanted to absolutely destroy Germany so it could never rise again to threaten him. Whereas the Allies, the other Allies, US and Britain, want to make sure that they're able to regrow and stabilize because they realized the mistake after the Treaty of Versailles in World War One, where Germany was so crippled by the treaty that it basically caused World War II. They don't want to see that happen again. They want Germany to trade. So they disagreed about reparations, what to do with that. You could also say they disagreed about Poland because it's clear that the British want Poland to be a democracy, and they've got those Polish government living in London, the London Poles. You could also talk about how the US wants that, but Stalin wants to keep Poland really communist so that it's friendly to him. Because, I mean, to be fair to him, Russia has been invaded numerous times through Poland. You can also talk about the tension because they still haven't won the war, and there's this big concern about what is Stalin going to do to all those countries he's liberated. And you've also got that Churchill, there's also a bit of tension going on as well because Churchill's not sure what's going on with Roosevelt because Roosevelt seems to still be quite friendly to Stalin. Churchill wanted Roosevelt to be more strict on Stalin. However, it seems like they're still getting along, and the Churchill seems to realize we're not a superpower anymore. Britain is not part of the big three, really. It could just be the big two at the end of this, which would be America and Russia. So there's all that tension going on in the background that leads on to the next conference. So you decide what you want to do. Are you going to do number one or number two? You could, if you've got a consequence of your own, you could do. And what I would say is to now pause the video and can you write your one consequence essay? We're looking for a couple of sentences, maybe a third of a page of writing perhaps. You've got about 5 to 6 minutes. If you time yourself and try and get as much done in 5 to 6 minutes as you can, and then re-pause, re-go on the video, and then see what happens. I'll give you an exemplar afterwards. Great. So thank you for doing that consequences question. I've chosen to have a look at the agreements that they made as a consequence because I thought that was quite a nice light-hearted one to do. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to start off by saying, well, what happened next? What did they agree? And what's this going to lead to? So I said one consequence. We always start with the question, don't we? One consequence of the Yalta Conference was the Allies' agreements that would shape the future of Europe now that Nazi Germany was close to defeat. So I've set the tone now with my point. Here we go. For example, once defeated, Germany would be divided into 4 parts. I could have said zones, I said parts. One for each of the US, France, Britain, and the USSR. This would allow each side to administer their respective zones before hopefully reuniting of the country. So the idea is that they've agreed to this and it will shape the future of Germany. I've also said it also meant that Europe would be demilitarized and Nazi war criminals would be hunted down and brought to justice. However, and you can give a negative consequence here. However, as a consequence of some of Yalta's stumbling blocks, the Allies were unable to determine the fate of Poland, which was now under Soviet control. And although Stalin promised to hold free elections, the US was now unsure whether Stalin could be trusted or what his true intentions were. And since Berlin lay in the Soviet zone, questions were raised on the impact this would have. And this was something that had to be resolved in the next conference at Potsdam. So I've just sort of hinted that the consequences of the agreement were that they agreed to some things, but they've also disagreed about something that would have to still be resolved in the next conference. So unresolved issues. That's what I've gone with. I hope you had a chance to write down some ideas, and I hope this was useful in helping you write your answer.